Hello, everybody. How's it going? It's a Sunday. Sunday. And it's time for another craft chat. It feels like it's been a long time since I did this because the one in February was on the 11th, so it's been over a month. At some point I might get consistent in when these are, and that's fine. Not totally sure. All of this is still experimental. Hello, the kids are asleep. Good to see you. I have been changing Patreon things, and so I'm going to also be doing a group call for higher tier patrons, and so I'm going to do different things in that versus what I'm doing here, and we'll figure all these things out because I want to do special things for my patrons, but I also think that there's a great benefit to doing these craft chats as a thing that is live and available to everybody. Right at the start, I'm going to remind everyone that tonight at 7 p.m. EDT, we have the next session of Girl by Moonlight's Fractured Spire, starring The Kids Are Asleep, The Rising Tides. I don't 100% remember everybody's Twitch account, so I'm just going to give their people names. Yori Kusano, Yoi Goenlin, Valerie Valdez, and Brandon O'Brien, and myself. Brandon is GMing. And this episode, this session should probably be more adventure-y and less capitalism is hell-ish. That's the hope. We went pretty hard on the capitalism is hell in that first episode, and I think this time we'll get to do some dream adventures and things, is the expectation. That's been a lot of fun. I'm very excited. I wish we could play more often, but scheduling is difficult, and I'm trying to schedule another game for Speculate. So I'm glad to have that game in my life, even if I would be very happy to play it much more frequently. Such is the way of things. Back when I was in high school and college, and I think it's I don't know about especially in college, but during that chunk of time, I played so many tabletop games because I did not have as many things, and the people I played with did not have the types of responsibilities that the people I play with have now. But there was a chunk of time in 2012 to 2015 or so when I just didn't get to play tabletop hardly at all. So I'm very glad to be back in a place where I am playing on the regular, both with home games and with stuff that is streamed. So that is that. I'm going to remind everyone that these streams are powered by my Patreon at patreon.com/Michael R. Underwood. And so if you like what I'm doing here, you can support that work by becoming a subscriber or doing something here on Twitch, or by backing over at patreon.com. I am typing because I'm pulling in a link. There is a tabletop RPG and video game charity bundle right now on itch.io for that's the bundle for Ukraine, which is benefiting the International Medical Corps and Voices of Children. It's got over 1,000 works and has a minimum $10 USD donation. I donated and looked at some of the games, and there is amazing stuff in there. So I definitely recommend giving that a shot if you have not already taken a look at it and are in a position to be able to send some money to some organizations trying to help people in Ukraine right now. So that is that. I have one writing question from patrons ahead of time, and then I have one other topic that I had in mind, but for you all who are watching, if you have questions about what I'm talking about or other topics that you'd love to talk about, just throw those in the chat and let me know, and we will hang out and talk shop for a while. I'm guessing this will probably be shorter than my normal Sunday streams, so wrapping up somewhere between 2:30 and 3-ish. But more people have more things to talk about, then we may go a little longer. So that is all the preamble, I believe. So yeah. So Paul, who is great at questions and does amazing interviews and is a smart reader and a cool photographer, shout outs to Paul, asks or says, I am interested in some of the similarities between roguelikes and games like Elden Ring. You play both kinds of games, and I wonder if you might speak to what both games try to do and what they offer to players in terms of a challenge. So yeah, to lay groundwork, roguelikes are video games that are run-based. So you don't so much have you have a save, but you play a cycle of the game, and then the cycle ends, and then you start from the beginning of the cycle. And in a quote-unquote pure roguelike, there is nothing that is saved from run to run. Most games that people talk about as roguelikes might be described as roguelites, Lites, because there is a form of meta progression. During your individual run, you might earn resources or unlock things that apply throughout further runs on that same save. And roguelites have become pretty popular because there is that sense of meta progression. In a game like Hades, you are getting narrative meta progression, as well as some mechanical meta progression, because there are some resources that don't go away at the end of your run. They don't go away until you spend them. And then in Hades, between each run, you'll get some narrative, or over the course of your runs, you might unlock a conversation with a different character. So that's a quick rundown of roguelites. Roguelikes. I'll probably mostly say roguelikes, though I mean the ones that do have some overall progression. And Elden Ring is the newest game by From Software, the people who made Dark Souls and Demon Souls and Bloodborne. And Elden Ring has some creative contributions from George R.R. Martin. It's not especially clear at this point the extent of those creative contributions. So I'll mostly be talking about FromSoft, and then George R. R. Martin was involved somewhere along the way. So I think there is an interesting overlap in some of what roguelikes and Elden Ring do. Paul kind of pegs one big thing, which is a question of challenge or difficulty. Difficulty is a whole big thorny topic in video games because there's lots of different things that people might talk about as difficulty. It might be difficult to read the user interface of a game. It might be difficult to execute moves the way that you want to. It might be difficult to understand how to do things like leveling up. It might be difficult to know where you're supposed to go. So there's a lot of different forms of difficulty. In Elden Ring, a lot of enemies they have a varied set of moves that they use. The inputs are very demanding, and the combat is thought of as deliberate, where there's not a lot of opportunity to kind of cancel what you want to do and go to do something else. In some action games, you can do basically command canceling, where you've pressed the attack button 3 times, but in between attack 2 and attack 3, you want to dodge, and so you push the dodge button and you get to dodge. In Dark Souls, it is harder to... thank you, Rock God. My understanding of that difference is accumulated from a lot of different sources, and I especially want to shout out the people at Waypoint, which is Vice's video game vertical, because most of my understanding of that difference is taken from people during conversations for things like Waypoint Radio, which is their podcast, and then some of their live streams. So credit where credit is due on that. So yeah, Elden Ring's difficulty, because you can go anywhere, you will be able to go to places that you're not expected to be able to win the fights. And so the difficulty is the individual difficulty of the area or the threats or the monsters, but also some difficulty in figuring out where you're supposed to be my perspective and my experience has been that there's a lot of places in the game where you can go but not fight the enemies, or where fighting the enemies is really difficult, but because you have a horse, you can just ride around and get stuff and explore and avoid a lot of fights. So that's a different, there's like some complexity, or there's some nuance in the question of challenge. In roguelikes, I think both likes and lights, with or without meta progression, a lot of those games, when you first start playing them, they feel very difficult because you are trying to figure out how the game works. There may or may not be a lot of tutorialization. In games where you do have meta progression, maybe the game is balanced so that you're not expected to start winning your runs until you've accumulated some resources on the meta progression. In a non-meta progression rogue game, you're usually not expected to win your first run. Instead, the difficulty is, here's all these different ways that the game fits together, and one of the things you need to do is learn how everything works, so that then on future runs, you have the experience and the knowledge to be able to overcome those difficulties and those challenges that defeated you the first or early times through. So in this case, I'm thinking of something like Darkest Dungeon 2 is a roguelite. There is meta progression. The very, very first run of Darkest Dungeon 2 that I did during basically the first day of early access, and I actually streamed it, so you can find it on my YouTube. I was learning a bunch of things at once, even though I'd played Darkest Dungeon 1, and I did not do super great in that first run. My second run, I did much better. They've changed some balance things. So I think there are some overlaps in challenge. A lot of it comes down to framing skill and experience as one of the primary ways that you get better at the game. That it's less about developing the muscle memory of doing a certain set of moves in a certain order, and more about gaining knowledge and gaining mastery of the tools that you already have access to. And then in both a roguelite or a kind of Souls-like or Soulsborne, which is the kind of descriptor for games like Dark Souls and Demon Souls and Bloodborne. Specifically in this case, I'm talking about a FromSoft game, so there's more continuity in how all these games works, because it's the same developer, even though people have come and left over years. So in both of those games, most of what you're gaining is experience and knowledge, and the experience allows you to successfully execute on your plan more easily than you might have done when you didn't have as much experience. Other similarities are the fact that you have this kind of the run. In Elden Ring specifically, there are checkpoints called Sites of Grace. And when you reach a Site of Grace, you can unlock it. And when a Site of Grace is unlocked, you can fast travel to it, and you can rest at that Site of Grace. When you rest at a Site of Grace, all of your hit points and focus, which is like mana, like your magic points, all of that is refilled. All of your flasks, which is basically a renewable resource that will give you health or focus back. And you have a capacity of flasks, and so when you rest at a Site of Grace, all of your flasks are refilled. But when you rest at a Site of Grace, all of the enemies that can respawn will respawn. There are some enemies that don't, like bosses and particular types of mini-boss characters. But most things respawn. And what that means is that the time between resting at Sites of Grace is a little bit like a roguelike run, especially very early in your game, where you are expecting to die a lot, do a lot of work in terms of discovery, and develop the knowledge and skill to build a plan to get from one side of grace to the next side of grace that you want to get to without dying. Because if you die, you go back to your last side of grace generally. There are a couple of exceptions because there's a thing in the world. There's things in the world that are give you an alternative respawn point, but I'm going to try to be simplified at this point, just for ease of conversation. So if you're in Stormvale Castle, okay, there's a big boss at the end of the castle, and there's particular ways through the castle. If I'm at one site of grace in the castle and I want to make forward progress toward the boss, I'm running around in the castle, I'm trying to explore, I'm trying to get items, I'm trying to get runes that will let me do level ups, and I'm trying to get to another site of grace. Because if I can get to another site of grace that's along the path to the boss, I can rest there, reset everything, regain all of my flasks and health and so on, and then all the enemies that respawn are theoretically behind me, and then I can keep going forward toward the boss. But if I start at this site, the first site of grace, and I die before I get to the next one, I kind of start a new run from that first site of grace. And I keep on trying until I then get to that whatever that next checkpoint is. And so the importance of repetition as a tool for gaining experience and knowledge and sometimes resources is fairly prominent in both a roguelite, where you gain some resources from that kind of last your whole save, and in a Soulsborne or a Souls-like, as in Elden Ring. And my experience with these games has been that it took some time for me to internalize that mode of play as something that has progress and has forward movement. In, when I was, 5 or so, 4 or 5, maybe 6, playing like a Mega Man or a Super Mario, when you run out of lives in Super Mario, you have to start over. Like, people don't talk about it as being a roguelike or a roguelite because there's a variety of other factors that make something that like this. Because in a roguelike or a roguelite, there's also tends to be like procedural generation of spaces or of the levels that you're moving through, which is an important difference between Elden Ring and Souls-likes and rogues or roguelites. So there's some other differences there that I'm not dwelling on very much because I'm mostly talking about the commonalities. I spent a long time playing games where you get to save more often, your data is kind of saved, and you have kind of your overall progress through the game. And rather than playing for 30 minutes and then losing and having to go back to the start, or playing for 2 hours and then having to go all the way back to the start in a game that has a longer run cycle within a roguelite. I'd been playing games where you had your save, and if you died, you went back to a last checkpoint, but you generally didn't lose your resources, and you just kind of keep on moving forward through the game. And dying was maybe it's certainly less common than in something like a Soulsborne or in like losing a run in a roguelike or a roguelite. So when I first played, the first of these FromSoft games in this tradition that I played was Bloodborne. And I had heard that Bloodborne was very hard. I had kind of heard the whole difficulty discourse around Dark Souls and so on. And so I played, and the frequency with which I died without being able to make forward progress to another checkpoint was high enough that I got frustrated with the game and kind of put it down. Then I watched a full playthrough of Bloodborne done by Natalie Watson at Waypoint, with kind of other people as coaches and helpers. And then Meg got into Bloodborne. And watching her play Bloodborne and watching this other run helped me reframe my understanding of games like this, so that I thought of playing and dying and learning something as still making forward progress. And I think that mindset is really important for both a roguelike, especially a roguelike where you don't have meta progression, but even a roguelite, and for Souls games where my primary objective is not always get to the next checkpoint. Sometimes it is get resources that will let me level up. Sometimes it is find items. Sometimes it is learn how to fight an enemy. Sometimes it is learn what is around the corner because I haven't gotten around the corner yet. And sometimes it is explore and get to the next checkpoint, or get to the boss, or get to the boss and fight the boss. By diversifying my option or my menu of goals, I was able to take a lot of the sting out of how frequently I die, or how frequently you will die or lose in a run-based game or in a Soulsborne. And that mindset change, I think, worked to a similarly beneficial degree in roguelikes as a metaphor for writing career. Oh no, yeah. In every procedurally generated novel that is procedurally generated by your brain, but much more difficultly, you only learn how to write the novel that you're in, but you also learn about writing in general. I think that and people have talked about this, so it's not like a super original thought. People have talked about the idea of developing experience and familiarity with Souls games or Soulsborns as a way of developing resilience, where you learn to not be as disheartened by failure or by setbacks. And so I think there's been pieces on various websites about, Dark Souls is a perfect pandemic game because it trains you to kind of to not be totally bowled over by setbacks or failures. It is a game, the Souls-likes are about community in a particular way because communities of players come together and share knowledge and help each other, and you can do co-op and help other players overcome boss challenges. And there's a whole many essays and probably several books worth of material over there along that tangent of like these games for pandemic stuff. In terms of like jumping off of the kids are asleep's comment and trying to rope in what Paul asked, I think that idea that you can have a variety of measures of success or a variety of intentions or objectives at any given moment during a endeavor is really useful, because it allows you to be more conscious in how you think about framing. So in writing, if my primary and exclusive method for determining career success is I'm not a success until I've hit the New York Times bestseller list, if that's like the only thing that you care about and you measure every book against that singular bar, it will probably be very frustrating for you as a writer unless you get really lucky and get the right book at the right time with a strong level of publisher support so that you have enough copies sold into bookstores that it's even possible to hit the New York Times list, or that you're selling so well in ebook that you can hit the New York Times list because how those lists are formulated. Again, that's something that is a bigger, longer topic. The New York Times bestseller lists are not just straight reads of sales numbers, unfortunately. There is curation that goes into it, which has caused a lot of problems, a lot of pushback, and a lot of frustrations for a variety of writers and publishers over the course of many years. So if, as a writer, you're only going to be satisfied with a book if it hits the New York Times list, you probably are going to get a lot of frustration, and there may not be as many ways. You may not set yourself up to be happy about the various other victories or other ways that you can feel successful as a writer. If you have a variety of objectives, and so with any given book, you could be satisfied by how happy you are with your writing. You could be satisfied by trying something new that you haven't tried before, whether it is writing in a different subgenre, writing a different type of character, writing different tropes, writing different types of relationships. You could be satisfied by selling the book to the publisher that you want to work with, or to an editor that you want to work with, or that you could be satisfied by this book getting an agent's interest so that they offer and want to work with you. You could get satisfaction as a self-published author by any of the same creative goals for satisfaction in terms of your skill or craft or accomplishment there. You have to enjoy the process, not only the progress, absolutely. And I think it's then also useful to think about process, that progress is a process, and process is progress, because experience doing the thing, even if it's the same thing over and over again, does make you more experienced overall, and especially at that individual thing. So all of the fight scenes that I've written over the course of my career make me better at writing any given fight scene that I want to write. Same for any other element of craft. You may use or deploy that element of craft in a new way, so it's a new challenge, but you're coming at it with the accumulation of experience that you've developed over the course of your career. And so if you're setting yourself a new challenge using an aspect of craft that you've practiced a lot, you have a breadth of experience that you can draw on in trying to address this new challenge. Much in the same way that if you are someone who has played a lot of roguelikes or a lot of these Soulsborne games and you play another one, you have a breadth of experience. And something that is fun for me in playing Elden Ring is I've played enough of FromSoft's games in this style that I am now aware of some of FromSoft's house style, the way that they tend to put games together, the type of jokes and tricks that they play on the player. And so I can either get joy from anticipating those things and evading the trap that they've laid, or if I didn't notice it and then the trap is sprung or something, that the game kind of pulls a trick on me, and then I can laugh as I identify how that trick or how that misfortune fits into a broader game design style or a signature that is how FromSoft operates. I'm like, yep, you got me. You did this type of thing. In a lot of these games, there are giant rolling boulders that will bowl you over. And if you get hit by a boulder, you're basically always going to die because it does so much damage. And I got to a part of Elden Ring, and I don't want to spoil the specifics, where I saw boulders kind of popping out and rolling down at me. And when that happened, I was amused, because here is another trope that they like using, and here it is in a different situation that's a bit unexpected because of some of these other circumstances and things that make sense in how the world works, the world of the game and the story, but are new and not the same as how the giant rolling boulders of death have shown up in other games. So I come to appreciate the craft of those designers finding new and interesting ways of screwing me over, even if it halts or interrupts my progress in one way. The process of learning more and experiencing elements of the game is really fun and rewarding, because I've developed a familiarity, and so I'm bringing that familiarity and finding things that fit those patterns that I've come to understand. In a roguelike, you can learn the kind of patterns that are used by the procedural generation in the game design and see, oh, okay, well, when in this tile set, if you have a this and a that, then you're going to tend to have some other thing, and you can learn to read the process or read that algorithm to a certain degree, which is also pretty fun. Other things that are interesting in terms of Elden Ring. On challenge for Elden Ring, and this is something that people have talked a lot about, so I'm not treading a bunch of new ground, but maybe y'all haven't heard it, and it's something that I think is interesting and worth talking about. In a lot of these games, and especially in Elden Ring, you as the player have some control over how difficult the game is. Not by going into a menu and changing settings so much, as by how you approach the game. in a lot of chunks of the game, you can just jump on your horse. It's probably actually a yak because it has horns. You can jump on your steed and just run away from challenges. And that makes some things easier because some of these you can just ride by and you don't have to deal with them. Or you can ride through a space, pick the items you want, and just keep going. And so that is a dial you can turn up or down. How much are you using Torrent, who's the name of the steed, to get away from challenges? Another thing that you can do that can impact challenge or difficulty is using spirit ashes. So spirit ashes are kind of like, in MMO terms, there's like summons. They are NPCs who you can spend usually magic points to summon in certain areas of the game, and they will help you. And they each have their own attack set, and they have their own health bar, and they can sometimes take enemies' attention away from you, which will make things easier because then you can attack the enemy without them focusing on you. So that's another thing you can do. Do you use spirit ashes? If you do, are you putting resources into advancing those spirit ashes so they're more powerful? Are you using NPC summons? For some bosses, the Ghost Wolves, for those who have been watching the Tarnished Turbo series. My Ghost Wolf friends who are very, very useful. Some bosses, you can summon a friendly NPC who will fight for you, which is different than the Spirit Ashes because they're much more limited in where you can summon them. And what you summon, who you summon is a specific character with a specific set of capabilities, and it's always the same set of capabilities each time you summon that individual character. You can't level up NPC summons in that way. You can also summon other players. If you have a group code, you can kind of like control who can join your game, or you can just like basically put your hope out into the world by using an item that reveals summon symbols that are put down by other players. Those players have opted into being helpers, to going to somebody else's game and helping them. So if you don't use player summons, you don't use NPC summons, you don't use spirit ashes, and you don't use your horse to get away from enemies, you are playing a much harder version of the game. You are in control of whether you do certain things that can make the game easier. And you can use or not use those different tools in different combinations at different times of the course of the game. You also can go to different places in the game under your own control. Unlike something like Dark Souls or Bloodborne, where there is latitude in where you can go, but it's more constrained, certainly more constrained than Elden Ring. Elden Ring is an open world game. You can start the game and just once you get your horse, you can get on your horse and go to an area that is challenging to me 50 something hours into my game. You could go there right then if you wanted, and you could fight those enemies. And if you were really good at avoiding enemy attacks and you were really patient, you could beat those enemies. You're just going to do damage really slowly. So that's another, you can basically set challenges for yourself. Do you find enemies that are easier to defeat first? Do you go and look for harder challenges? Do you go looking for extra things to try to do, either to gather resources to make things easier or to set yourself additional challenges? Another major thing in Souls-likes is the fact that usually from the very beginning of the game, there is an area with enemies that are very easy relative to the rest of the game. But they will still give you the resource that you need to level up and make your character more powerful. So they're basically grinding areas, to use MMO terms. So if you want, you could, whenever you are faced with a big challenge, just stop making forward progress toward whatever boss or that you want, find an area to grind, and spend 10 hours just killing the same enemies in the same cycle and resetting and gathering resources and leveling up until your character is much more powerful. And then you can go back to whatever challenge you were facing. There are a lot of games where you can do grinding, but the Soulsborns are absolutely a game where you can just grind more to make all of the game easier, because you will have more health, you will do more damage, you will any number of things that you can make more powerful. You can use resources to make your weapons more powerful or to buy new spells or something like that. So with Elden Ring specifically, there are a lot of knobs and levers that you can adjust to make the game more or less difficult. And I think that that's an important thing to think about for Elden Ring and for Soulsborne games in general, because difficulty as a term for video games can be very vague or amorphous. And when people talk about the FromSoft Souls games as being very hard, it's important to dig into that a little bit and think, what type of difficulty do they mean? And to what degree are they or are they not incorporating the levers and knobs that the player has control of for gauging or modifying how difficult the different parts of the game are for them. So that's about a half an hour on roguelikes and Elden Ring and Soulsbornes and things. I should have brought I should have gotten myself a lozenge because talking a lot straight in these craft chats, it's a lot more talking than in when I'm streaming video games, because it's just me and you and chat. So that is that. Does anybody have any questions while we're on like roguelikes, roguelites, and Elden Ring or Soulsbornes before I move on to the kind of prepared topic that I had? And if you have questions about anything else, or if you have questions about craft of writing, business of publishing, and or like RPGs and video games, you can ask me about how I make pizza, but I'd have to go and find my recipe and do that. If you ask me things about my personal life, I may just say no. So it's not quite an AMA, but I'm happy to be somewhat broad in topics, because this is a little bit of a catch-all type of stream format. Okay, just checking a couple of places where things may be occurring. Downside of being a digital human is that there are a million places where people can contact you. Check the 7 different platforms where people can send you messages, just in case someone used an unexpected one. No. So the thing that I had prepared to talk about, or that I had basically already written down and taken some notes on for a stream when there weren't as many questions asked ahead of time, was the idea of developing multiple pitches for the same project. This is something that I have gotten a lot of practice in because of being a sales and marketing manager at Angry Robot, and from being a sales rep before that, and being a bookseller before that, and being a game store employee before that, and from being a writer, where if I hold up my copy of Annihilation Aria and just read you the back cover copy, that is one way that I and the publisher pitched this book. The blurb from one of my writer colleagues is another way that they pitch this book. So I think it's important, firstly, to broaden your idea about how do I sell this thing that I've made, to there is no one true pitch that is perfect for every situation and every person. Because 1, people bring different experiences and expectations to any conversation. 2, you're going to find yourself in different situations. And 3, it is very difficult for any single pitch to capture all of what could be interesting about a project, especially if we are thinking broadly about all of the set of all different people who might be interested in your work. So the back cover copy for Annihilation Aria was developed kind of with the expectation of a certain sense of who the readership for this book was. People who like space opera, people who like kind of found family and action adventure, probably people who liked the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, people who are into or at least open to this kind of synthwave retro 80s-y vibe that we used for the lettering. And so there's all these different clusters and indicators and signifiers that made up our sense of who the ideal reader for that book was. And so we pitched trying to kind of hit the center of that overlapping conglomeration of audiences, because, you know, not everybody that likes retro synthwave also likes found family space operas, you know, and so on and so forth. So you're kind of going for the middle of overlapping sets. If you try to pitch a project to everybody in the world and you say, oh, well, it's anybody can enjoy this. Well, anybody could enjoy it, but not everyone will. Not everyone will enjoy anything. You can find like your absolute favorite book of all time that you would brook no criticism of, and it's fine if your favorite book you're happy to criticize. Whatever your favorite book is, there are people who hated it, and that's fine. Like a thing that people recommend to writers when a writer is feeling bad about reviews that they've gotten on their book is to go and find your very favorite book and look at the 1-star reviews for that book, because there will be people who hated it. There will be people who just did not get it. There will be people who are not at all the audience for it and are angry about it because they wanted the book to cater to them. So take the fact that not everything is for everybody as a liberatory fact, because to succeed in a creative form, you do not have to appeal to every single person who likes that form. As an author, I don't have to appeal to even all science fiction fantasy readers. You can make a pretty good career by identifying certain subchunks of a broader audience that are more likely to like the thing that you want to make, and then you keep making that type of thing, and then your biggest challenge is getting that thing in front of those people consistently and making it easy for them to buy that thing. Because if you write a book where it's clear to a potential reader whether it is likely to be the thing for them, you have gotten so far along the path to setting yourself up for success as a creator. Discoverability is a gigantic problem in many, if not every, creative field at this point. So having the multiple pitches is not necessarily going to solve the discovery problem, but it gives you a set of tools. It kind of gives you like a Batman utility belt, where the different things on the belt can be different pitches for different types of people. So I'll get into specifics. So one way to pitch Annihilation Aria is like if the Guardians of the Galaxy movie was crossed with the 1999 movie The Mummy with Rachel Weisz and Brendan Fraser. That is a Hollywood comp, A meets B. It focuses on kind of high concept and market position and a bit of like actor fondness. I have to say the 1999 The Mummy, because there is a more recent Hollywood mummy movie with Tom Cruise that I have not seen. And that is not what I had in mind when I wrote this book. So I have to be specific when I do my comp. Before that more recent mummy movie came out, I could have said just The Mummy, because the top thing that most people would have known is that movie that I'm referring to. Now, of course, that movie is not the first The Mummy, because one, mummification is an actual process within a cultural historical tradition and religious tradition. And there are a bunch of other movies that are about mummies that are more or less based in historical reality. So a comp or Hollywood style pitch is usually, it's like A meets B. And often, I think if you can, it's good to go, it's like A meets B, and then you put a comma after whatever the B is, and then you say a little bit more that either clarifies how it's A meets B, or it puts like an additional spin or twist on what A meets B is. What that can do is make your work out to be more than just, I smushed these two things together and they made a blah, and my thing is the blah. This A meets B plus something is a formulation that I learned from literary agent Dongwon Song when they were teaching at the Writing Excuses retreat in like 2017, I think. So credit to them for that formulation. They're a very good follow on Twitter, and I think probably still have a Substack where they talk about things. I'm not sure. I haven't checked on that in a while. Some folks who watch may know Dongwon from being a cast member in Rebel Crown, Splendor and Shadow. So yeah, if I was going to do that formulation for Annihilation Aria, it would be like Guardians of the Galaxy meets the 1999 The Mummy, where a cheery xenoarchaeologist and a kind of stoic last member of a warrior people stumble onto a big find that puts them into the crosshairs of a galactic empire. So that's a little bit longer of a pitch. Alternatively, it could be like Guardians of the Galaxy meets the Mummy with a strong found, like let's see, what else, what twist? The thing about having a good A meets B is that it does a lot of the work, and so then I have to think about what extra thing do I want to do. Yeah, so it could be, it's like Guardians of the Galaxy meets the Mummy with space battle choral music. Like I have a magic system that is executed through singing, and it's specifically battle magic for Lara. So that's like that is a specific detail that is only in this book and is not just A meets B. Magic in Guardians of the Galaxy is very wobbly because it's a kind of it is not hard science fiction space opera. It's very much action-y pulp space opera. And in The Mummy, the magic is very culturally contextualized, kind of within the Book of the Dead, the Book of the Living, and so on. And the magic in Annihilation Aria is neither of those things by a lot. And so I reference something that is specific or individual, so that my Hollywood-style comp has something extra to it. If you, like, for whatever your book is, depending on how clear or not, how direct or not your A or B titles are as comparisons, you may modify them in some way. So you might say, my book combines the found family elements of Guardians of the Galaxy and the kind of battle couple aspect of the 1999 The Mummy, and then you add something else. So when you're doing the Hollywood style comp, it's like A meets B. You can also get specific. You could say the something of A meets the something of B, and then maybe you combine it with something else, like the something of A meets the something of B plus a third comp or some other element that you don't frame in the you don't frame as a comp. It's either distinctive or you're just kind of using another framing pitch tool. So that's one major type of pitching your thing. We have done that type of pitch for Annihilation Aria. Another type of pitch is to pitch the tone or the genre or subgenre. Some people, if you say, hey, do you like space opera? They'll go, yes, I love space opera. And then I just hand them the book and they can take a look at it and decide it for themselves. There's some people who love genres broadly and deeply and are going to just want to check out anything that is in that genre or subgenre. During the height of steampunk, there are a lot of people who were like, just give me all the steampunk things. People who love grimdark, give me all the grimdark things. I like to pitch, if I'm going to pitch subgenre, I like to also pitch tone, because not every genre, a lot of genres have a range of tones. There is even a range of tones in grimdark. Because some grimdark is like super nihilistic and it's not just nihilistic, it's also misanthropic. It says things are bad and people are bad and none of it matters at all. There's other grimdark that is like things are really bad and everybody is imperfect, but here are some people who are trying. And that's those can both be grimdark, but the tone is different. So a tone and genre pitch for Annihilation Aria would be, Annihilation Aria is a found family space opera adventure, or it's like an upbeat found family space opera adventure. So upbeat is tone, found family is a trope, but it's also like, it's a popular enough trope that it can be its own type of story. Found family, I think, also tends to gesture a little bit toward tone, that the found family is worth being a family. Now, there are some found families that are very complicated and trend negative. It doesn't tend to come up as much when I hear people talk about or pitch something in terms of found family, but maybe that's an avenue to explore. So, upbeat, found family, space opera, adventure. So space opera is the subgenre. Adventure is a subgenre indicator within space opera, and also somewhat suggests tone, because within the kind of books world, if people talk about something as adventure fiction, it is usually a bit more faster paced. It may be upbeat. Adventure fiction and pulp fiction in science fiction fantasy overlap to a certain degree. So a tone and genre pitch makes a specific type of promise about the experience or the emotional experience that someone may have reading the book. If I say that something is upbeat and found family and adventure, I am saying you're going to have an experience of a book that will give you hope, that will probably read quickly, and may give you happy, fuzzy feelings about found families. So there's a little bit of an emotional experience promise in the tone and subgenre pitch, or there can be. And I think that that's really useful, because from a reader perspective, if I'm looking at several different books, one of the things that I think about a lot when I'm not sure which book to pick up is what type of experience is each of these books going to probably give me, based on what the packaging says and what I've heard about the book from people. So at a given point, I might go, okay, well, I'm going to read this contemporary romance because it is probably going to give me happier, fuzzy feelings than this intricate sociological science fiction that I have heard from friends is fairly emotionally intense. Is like emotionally intense because a lot of things are going wrong. A romance has emotional intensity, but there is enough of a plot structure or formula in romance that gives some guidelines to what types of emotional intensity are most likely. And the formula does not mean that it's not hard to write. It kind of makes it harder to write because you are within certain bounds of expectations and structures. So you have to innovate in a different way. So I have a lot of respect for romance writers, and I want to make sure that when I talk about formula, I'm not doing it so in a derogatory, dismissive fashion. Like, just be really clear there. So expectations and knowing what you're getting to as a writer is really handy, especially when I'm thinking about pitching to a general reader. So if I'm at Origins, Gen Con, or like a Comic Con, the people who come up to a booth where I'm selling a book, I think of as kind of the broadest definition of a science fiction fan, because they're not necessarily science fiction prose fans. They might be mostly comics readers at a Comic-Con. They might be mostly science fiction TV and film fans at something like Worldcon. They were probably tabletop RPG fans primarily if they are at Gen Con or Origins. But science fiction fantasy writ large has a lot of multimedia, transmedia aspects. There are video games that become movies. There are tabletop RPGs that become TV shows. There are a lot of TV shows that become, fiction, and there's back and forth across all these media. So if I'm at Gen Con, I'm going to pitch this book differently than I would as if I'm at Worldcon. If I'm at Worldcon, I can expect that more often than not, the average person that comes up to a table and is, somewhat curious about a book is going to have read more science fiction books and more science fiction books that are published recently, probably, than the person at Gen Con. I may meet someone at Gen Con who has read a ton of science fiction novels recently. That absolutely can happen. But if I'm thinking about where I calibrate my average starting pitch, I have found that there is some difference between those different types of events, even if the range is still pretty big. So if I'm at Worldcon and I'm pitching Genrenauts, I might ask, are you familiar with Jasper Ford's Thursday Next series? I'm more likely to get a yes to that than if I ask at Gen Con, has been my experience. So at a event where people are more likely to be really thoroughly read in science fiction fantasy prose, I can use comparisons or touchstones that are deeper within that sphere compared to what I'm likely to use at a Comic-Con or a Worldcon. I can use Guardians of the Galaxy meets The Mummy at Comic-Con because those are both fairly large science fiction fantasy media properties. TV and especially film reach a very, very large audience compared to the most of science fiction fantasy prose. But if I have a book that is not as easy to compare in terms of large media properties, I may have an easier time pitching that book accurately and effectively at an event where more of the people who I'm pitching to have a broader and deeper reference set in science fiction fantasy prose. If I'm at a Comic-Con, I might want to, especially if it's really more comics oriented than all media or TV film oriented, to think, what pitches can I use for Annihilation Aria that are within the world of comics? Well, Guardians of the Galaxy is also a comic. Or I might say, are you familiar with the comic Vagrant Queen, which was co-created by a comics writer writer friend that I know, Magdalene Visaggio, co-created with Jason Smith. It was adapted into a TV show, so it also has that kind of media aspect. So I might ask, are you familiar with Saga or with Vagrant Queen? And I throw up a couple of comics comparisons, and then based on how they respond, I then characterize my book. Well, it's like this from this thing that we've already talked about plus something else. I find that the most effective pitching experiences that I have are conversations where it's not, I don't just go Guardians of the Galaxy meets The Mummy and point the book at somebody and then stop. I tend to have the best experiences when someone comes up to the table or I'm talking with someone and we just have a conversation. And over the course of that conversation, I hone in on my understanding of what they like in science fiction fantasy and whether there is an angle along which or an axis along which they might enjoy this book in specific. when I was working for Angry Robot stuff, I had a whole bunch of different books that I was selling. And so as I had that conversation with somebody, I had a bunch of different endpoints to direct them toward, 30 something different books where they say, oh, well, I really just read science fiction and I like stuff that is more rigorous and more focused on scientific speculation. Okay, well, it narrows me from here to here in just science fiction, and then kind of more science and science innovation oriented narrows me down to here. And I go, okay, well then, of what I have, I might pitch them these 2 or 3 different books. And there you go. Yeah, I agree. The kids are asleep. Kids are asleep says, I find it's good to have other books you can recommend for that reason. Your book may not be right, but you can still be a helper. Absolutely. Because if what they're looking for is not what you have to give them, but you give them a good recommendation, they may still carry away a positive association with you and with that experience. So they might try your book out anyway. They might just go and read one of your friends' books. And if you recommend somebody else's book and they go and enjoy that book, you have helped that other person. And more broadly, you have increased the amount to which, in a broad sense, science fiction readers get to find what they want and have a good experience reading science fiction fantasy. And that's positive, because that probably means they're more likely to then keep reading science fiction fantasy books because they are satisfied doing so. And if I have an elaborate cabal, finger plotty, of writer friends who are all supporting and pitching one another's books, then we all benefit one another. Yeah, and not as a dig, but I like to recommend lesser known books, so it's not Brandon Sanderson all the way down. The kids are asleep says. I also do this, where a lot of very popular authors do not need more people recommending their books proportionately, because so many people are recommending their books. The proportional increase to the financial and cultural success of a really, really popular science fiction author that is added by one more person recommending their book is proportionately tiny compared to the benefit to an author's career that I can give by recommending a book by a debut or by somebody who is not as well known, like basically anybody on the mid list. Because anybody who is a big financial or critical success already, at that point, they should have a bunch of people recommending their books because they've been read by a bunch of people, they've gotten award nominations, they are getting pushed by their publisher, so on and so forth. Mid-listers need the help. Absolutely, the kids are asleep. Speaking of which, did you know that The Kids Are Asleep is the author name for Valerie Valdez, the writer of the amazing Ava and Ascente science fiction books, which are also found family space operas and go beautifully with Annihilation Aria. So you should go and read those. There are 2 out already, and the 3rd one is coming this August. So there. And it's like, this is another thing where if somebody already read something that goes with your book, then you can say, oh, well, if you liked this, you might enjoy my book. And then conversely, you can say to people who have already read your work, maybe somebody comes back to the convention a year later. Gen Con 2020, you sold them a copy of your book. You see them Gen Con 2022. Anyway, the years don't matter. We had a pandemic. Amazon has started bearing that people who enjoy this also bought linked list, annoyingly. I'll get to that because I have some thoughts. So, you sell somebody a book this year and then you run into them again next year. Maybe you haven't written a sequel, or there isn't a sequel to the book that you sold them. And you chat and you might think, well, if you liked Aria, if you liked Annihilation Aria, you should definitely check out these books. And then you're benefiting not only that author, but you're also ensuring that there is a strong and happy readership for the type of book that you write. And by not spending all of your time focusing just on yourself, you are showing that you are invested in the success of other people. You have a broader set of things that you can pitch and recommend, because even a very prolific author is not going to be able to write something that is for any person who likes reading. Though there are certainly some people who seem like they're trying, and more power to them if they can write that quickly and effectively. Rising tide lifts all boats, right? So coming around to the Amazon thing, this touches a little bit on a topic that I'm going to kind of use as my starting point for the group call next week, which you can get into if you become a Patreon supporter at $10 or more at patreon.com/MichaelRUnderwood, which I will put into the chat again. Plug. Since I've also plugged other things. It used to be that one of the biggest vehicles for selling books on Amazon, one of the biggest vehicles that Amazon used to sell books, was people who enjoyed book A also bought book B. So if I looked at the title page for one of my books, I could see people who enjoyed this also bought, and then there'd be like 6 books, and then you could tab and you could get like another 6 books, maybe more. I then, as an author, know that that is who Amazon is recommending to people who've read my specific book. That then lets me look at those books, see whether I think they are things that go together, and then I can pitch my book to people who like those books, and I can pitch those books to people who like my books. And I can use the work that Amazon has done to benefit not only myself, but other authors. If you look at an Amazon product page today, you are likely to find 2 or possibly 3 lines of sponsored product pages, or 2 or 3 lines of sponsored products before you get to people who bought this also bought something else. And all of those spots, you have to use Amazon ads to get onto those spots. Amazon has created effectively, but not 100%, a pay-to-play market. In order to get access to the different tools that Amazon uses to sell books, in order to have anything approaching equal visibility with other books, it's not about how many copies you've sold. It's not about how many reviews you've had. It's not about trade reviews. It's not about even how many copies you sold on Amazon. A major factor is, are you spending money on Amazon to put ads out for your book? Are you giving money to Amazon for the opportunity for them to sell your book? There are other things in the field that are like this. There is cooperative marketing spend. I worked on this when I was both at Angry Robot and when I was a sales rep. So co-op is mostly a thing in the independent publishing space, or is the independent bookstore space, sorry. And what that might be is, I go into an independent bookstore as the sales rep, and I am pitching this new cookbook. And the bookstore is like, oh, oh, cool. This cookbook I think will work really well with my audience. Maybe you are selling, maybe I'm selling a book in Central Ohio, and it's a German cookbook. Oh, and there's a lot of German American folks who live in Central Ohio. I know this because I used to sell books to bookstores in Central Ohio. So then the bookstore might go, okay, well, I'm interested in, I think I'll probably take a pretty good number, but I know that I can promote this and do well with it. And I'm more likely to do that if you basically split that promotional money with me. If we cooperatively pay for that promotional work. Sometimes co-op goes into like local newsletters or local mailing lists or whatever, which is basically the bookstore says, I think I can sell this pretty well, and if you help me, I can probably sell it even better than I could just on my own. And then the publisher has the choice of whether to spend that. Co-op is very different than Amazon is responsible for more than 50% of possibly even physical book sales in the USA, and is definitely responsible for more than 60, possibly more than 70 or 80% of ebook sales in North America. When there are fewer places that can sell your thing, and that place requires that you give them money in marketing to get the chance for them to work at selling your book, that is pay for play. That is pay to play, and that is, in my opinion, monopsonic behavior. You may be familiar with the term monopoly or monopolistic behavior, where there's only one buyer. Like there's only one person who can sell you the thing. If Ford was the only car company, they would have a monopoly. We live in an economic situation in the U.S. where there's a lot of consolidation in a lot of businesses, and there are not necessarily, like in most industries, there's not one seller, but there's like 5, or there are under 10 who, by their powers combined, they are more than 80% of the market. And what they do is monopolistic behavior. They're not fully a monopoly, but they are doing things to suppress competition, which pushes toward them being a monopoly. This is a generalization and a summary of the economic ideas of monopolistic behavior monopolies. Monopoly the game, actually a perversion of an anti-capitalist board game by, I believe, an anarchist who created, I don't remember this person's name off the top of my head, so I'm going to look them up. Lizzie Maggie created the Landlords game, which was then reworked and twisted into Monopoly, which is very funny because capitalism took something that was anti-capitalist and turned it into something that is pro-capitalist, capitalism. So that's monopoly. Amazon has behavior that is not monopolistic because they're a marketplace rather than they're at their most powerful as a marketplace rather than as a producer. Like Amazon has their own publishing houses, 47 North, Montlake, Thomas and Mercer, and so on and so forth. Publishing companies that they own and operate. Amazon is a marketplace. They are not a single producer. They are a single buyer because this is a retail situation where the publisher does not sell directly to the reader for the most part. The publisher sells to the retailer, and then the retailer sells to the reader. If one retailer controls upwards of 80% of the market for a format, their behavior is monopsonic when they constrain competition, because they take their market share and say, well, if you want to play in here, if you want to participate in the market that produces 80-something% of the ebook sales, plus or minus however much, data is very hard to get. Amazon has lots of data and shares very little of it, and they can't necessarily be trusted because who is going to audit them? They're very big and scary. So these numbers that they report may not be accurate, but they may be. To sell ebooks as an independent author, if you are not selling on Amazon at all, you're probably giving up upwards of 70+% of your potential sales. If you sell on Amazon and you sell on Barnes & Noble and Apple and Kobo and so on and so forth, if you are not exclusive with Amazon, you are already at a disadvantage in selling ebooks on Amazon, because Amazon has an intense desire for authors' works to be exclusive to Amazon, to say, no, if you only sell your books through us, here are these extra benefits we give you. You'll get a higher percentage of sale in certain circumstances. You'll get a couple of these special promotional opportunities like highlighted discount deals and highlighted times when you have the book selling for free. And you can do this cool thing, Kindle Unlimited. Kindle Unlimited is Netflix for books in a broad sense. There's a bunch of books on Amazon that are on Kindle Unlimited. If you are a subscriber to Kindle Unlimited, you can have up to 10, maybe 12 of these Kindle Unlimited books just borrowed without having to purchase the individual book. You basically have slots. You go, okay, I want to download this, and this. And you can be reading them, and then you return a book when you're done, or when you're not going to read it, and then you download another one, and you can have so many books at a certain time, and you read them. The authors are paid based on a very sketchy algorithmic, or a very sketchy structure, where the number of pages of your Kindle Unlimited books that are read in a time period is then fed into a specific formula of you're getting this much per page for this month based on this many total pages read, and so we're going to pay this amount. Amazon is totally in control of what that amount is. They get to say what that per page rate is going to be. Kindle Unlimited gives you access to a big marketplace and a bunch of people who are super readers who read, hundreds of books a year. And from the reader's perspective, paying for Kindle Unlimited is a great deal, because for $10 or $15 a month, they can read as much as they want instead of having to pay $3, $5, $10, $15 per book. And so from their perspective, it's great. From an author's perspective, if you have to opt in to a system where people are not buying your books on a fixed price that you get to control, but instead people are reading books, and then you get paid based on how many pages of your book they read, as Amazon understands it, but then that your per page rate is totally at the dictate of Amazon, you're in a very vulnerable position as a writer, because Amazon controls 80-ish% of the market. And so to be on Amazon, you have to be on Amazon on their terms, because basically nobody is big enough to tell Amazon no and still get to be on Amazon as an individual author. You might be able to find counterexamples. 99.999% of authors are not those counterexamples. If you want to be on Amazon and you want the best chance for your book to be recommended and for someone to find it because it's been served to them, you have to be exclusive on Amazon, you have to be on Kindle Unlimited, and you have to be paying Amazon for ads. Kindle Unlimited borrows count in some way toward algorithmic ranking of, is your book in the top 100 of this subgenre? So if you're not in Kindle Unlimited, you're always at a disadvantage in ranking. And ranking is one of the ways that books are surfaced or recommended. If you are not on Kindle Unlimited, then you're not getting, if you're not doing ads, you're not showing up in the ad marketplace, which, as we discussed earlier, which kind of got us onto this topic from what Kids Are Asleep said. If half or more of the lines of things that are getting recommended are sponsored products, you're never going to be on that list unless you are paying Amazon to run ads for you. And then at their discretion, they will put you on those lists so that they can charge you money for your ads. Yeah. The Kids Are Asleep, do you have that link, the link to that Q&A on hand that we could put into the chat? If not, I will go looking for it. Okay, she says yes, so just a second. This will show up in the chat. I will try to read it out if I can, depending on how complicated of a link it is. For those that don't know, Brandon Sanderson has a very just phenomenally successful Kickstarter running right now that is currently the biggest Kickstarter of all time. So there is an FAQ or several FAQs about the Kickstarter and more broadly. And Brandon is an experienced and very adept author in terms of building his career. So this is www.brandonsanderson.com/sum-faqs-u-might-enjoy. And it looks like there's like a TLDR version to the kind of the biggest takeaways, which I read that first and then looked at some of the other things. Brandon has been in the business for some time, has been very smart about building his own brand as an author, about thinking about diversifying how he publishes, has, had already run a Kickstarter before this, has a whole staff, is basically running a one author publishing company in Dragonsteel Entertainment that also then does other media because he does comics and things. So whatever you think about Brandon's fiction, some people like him, some people don't. He has a lot of interesting and well-informed things to say about publishing based on his own experiences. So I recommend that to go and take a look. Brandon lays out the ways in which Amazon is unfair and Amazon requires pay to play. There are times when pay to play does not create huge structural problems in how a marketplace operates. Paying co-op to an individual bookstore for them to promote your work is pay to play, but it's very different than pay for advertising, or else you are being cut off from the primary discovery engine of this market, which controls 80% of sales in this category. If you don't see a difference between those, I don't know what else I can tell you in terms of talking about the role and the impact and the power that Amazon has within bookselling, specifically, in this case, North American English language bookselling is what I'm talking about really specifically. It works differently elsewhere in the world. Amazon is many places in the world, so they still have a great deal of influence and control of markets elsewhere in the world. Yeah, there's a difference between co-op support and blackmail/extortion. I would be very interested in the Department of Justice of the United States making a more thorough investigation of that line as it applies to Amazon's AMS system, their marketing system, and whether the consumer benefit criteria for antitrust investigation, which has been basically the sole criteria for deciding whether antitrust action should occur, and it's been that way for several decades, whether that criteria actually makes sense as the only thing to apply when we're thinking about sustainability of economic success for a broad set of people within a industry. A lot of antitrust action was about monopolies and monopolistic behavior. The economic situation of global trade in the 2020s is very different than the robber baron era of the 19th into 20th century. And our consumer and industrial protection laws and practices need to recognize that and be updated. IMO. I am in my IMHO. IMHO. So yeah, the Biden DOJ has been doing more than several previous presidents' administrations. I would like to see them doing even more. I think that Penguin Random House buying Simon & Schuster is bad for everybody except Penguin Random House. And probably some Simon & Schuster people at the very high level who are going to get a big paycheck. Is that really the same as the general interest of the people of the United States? It's really not. So that digression was like six boxes on the Mike Underwood streaming bingo card. Is anybody playing, keeping track? All right, so we are at about 2:30. That, we should loop back around and I will finish my multiple pitches idea. because we got on a long digression that I think was important, and that's fine. So we talked about Hollywood style pitches or comps, A meets B, sometimes A meets B with some other thing. We talked about tone and genre comps, which are about like the emotional experience that someone's going to have, or I think that is a good aspect to put into that pitch. There is also, you can do like a plot-based pitch or a character-based pitch. So continuing to use Arya as an example, I might pitch the plot as a archaeologist from Earth and a warrior member of a kind of mostly dying alien species work as like salvagers and scrappers at the edge of a galactic empire. They find a important artifact which puts them in the crosshairs of the like basically the police and military of that gigantic empire, which then sets them on a series of adventures and discoveries and puts them in like at the center of a nascent galactic rebellion. That is a plot-oriented pitch. Here are a couple of people. Plot is these are the things that happen to these people and that these people do and what happens as a result of that. That's the plot. I could pitch a character. I could do a character-oriented pitch, where I kind of leave off the last chunk of that, and I really dig in. So in the back cover copy, we kind of do this type of pitch: a woman who can wield a weapon like a song, a man who can outthink ancient dust traps, a pilot who flies her ship like a second skin. To keep the kettle out of Hawk, Lara, Max, and Wheel flout border patrols, salvaging artifacts from dangerous galactic ruins. So that's more character focused. Where I might say, Annihilation Aria is about a happily married couple, one of whom is a like a cheery xenoarchaeologist from Earth. The other is a stoic warrior who is one of the last members of her line of like royal bodyguards because her people's home planet were blown up centuries ago. These two met because they were each looking for specific types of artifacts. And instead of just being professional partners, they fell in love and got married. But here's the thing. The archaeologist wants to get home to Earth, and Earth is very far away. The bodyguard wants to find the lost heir of her people. But if she does, there's no way that that heir is going to let her stay married to a human and traipse around and have adventures. So we have these two people who have fallen in love and are invested in each other, but they are also each theoretically still trying to get to something that will pull them apart. Well, how does that end up working? In that situation, I really focus in on the characters, their relationship to each other, and the tensions that are unresolved and will play out across the story of this book. So if you have a book with like a romantic relationship, with a tension, with rivalry or antagonism, you can really focus in on the character dynamics that are a major engine of story in the book and pitch it that way. Because character is one of the most powerful aspects of storytelling in terms of getting people emotionally invested, because people can emotionally invest in people very easily. As a species, humans anthropomorphize and learn to empathize with lots of beings. We anthropomorphize stuff. Like this mouse. I could anthropomorphize this mouse. A slightly different design of mouse would be easier for people to anthropomorphize because it would seem like it was a cute animal. This is why a number of people, when they like kick or accidentally knock into something, will apologize to an inanimate object. It's largely why humans have companion animals, aka pets. So like humans invest in other beings that we think about as being people, even if they are not humans. So a character pitch can be very powerful. So in reverse order, that is a character pitch, a plot pitch, a tone or genre pitch, tone and genre pitch, or a Hollywood / comp style pitch. We could break it down into more types of pitches, and I could spend the next 60 minutes detailing and writing out full pitches, like, okay, here's a 1-sentence pitch, here's a 3-sentence version, here's a 5-sentence version of each of these pitches. But I won't, because that would basically be its own class, and I teach that class sometimes. If you want me to teach that class for you, get in touch with me. I would be happy to do so. I have taught with the Rambo Academy. I've taught workshops at conventions. I will probably teach more stuff at conventions this year. I am going to be teaching my Power and Politics in World Building class as a workshop at Flights of Foundry in April. So yeah, you can hire me to do that for you. Or if you want to hire me individually to help you develop those pitches for your specific book, you can also do that. I have mentoring or like kind of career coaching levels on my Patreon. The group call version, or you get a half an hour coaching every month as long as you are subscribed at this level. Or you can just email me or contact me directly to set up and see if you would like to do some of that types of coaching, or get some advice, or have me talk through my understanding of publishing in some other way, in the way that I talked about how Amazon sales work and its pay-to-play function, and some challenges that presents, and some problems it may create on top of the problems it's already created. So that, my friends, is that. While I am here, does anybody else have any questions building on what we have talked about, or other stuff about writing or publishing or games or things before I wrap up? So again, that Brandon Sanderson FAQ, you can find it at his website. The full URL is brandonssanderson.com/some-facts-u-might-enjoy. His Kickstarter at this moment is still ongoing. It's very interesting to go and look at, even if you're not necessarily interested in the books themselves, because of how he's talked very transparently about how all this works. And he's doing something where he's shipping both books and merch boxes to people. And the success of the Kickstarter is largely based on the fact that he generates a lot of fiction and has worked very effectively to foster and satisfy fan communities for his work, such that there is now demand for merch boxes for a bunch of different things that he's written. So that is also interesting. It is very difficult for any other author to replicate exactly what Brandon has done because of a lot of circumstances, but I think there's lessons that any number of us could take for, like, okay, how did this work? Why did this work the way that it did? Based on that, is there anything that I can do that makes sense, or stuff that I think I can kind of move into? Okay, question. The Kids Are Asleep asks, what kinds of revenue streams do you think are most worth pursuing beyond the actual book writing? Teaching, merch, bonus fiction on Patreon. I know this can vary by person. Yeah, I think the first thing that I would say is it does vary by person. If you are looking to diversify revenue streams so that you can make a living, like, okay, I do fiction, I need my money flow to do more than my fiction is doing, which is most writers. Then I think it's important to look at what are your most marketable skills within the kind of broad definition of being an author-writer. If you are thinking about diversifying revenue streams as an author broadly, there are a lot of authors who have day jobs. Makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. But if we're thinking about the kind of author version, then if you have teaching experience, teaching may be a good idea. If you have an MFA already, you might be able to teach at a writing program, whether it is an MFA program or a writing program at an undergrad university or a community college, or you might be able to teach at a local community center, or you might be able to teach online. I think if you write stuff that is very visual, and you know that you already have an active fandom where there are people who are doing fanish work about your stuff, then you are most likely to be able to effectively sell merch in a way that's going to become a notable revenue stream. Like for me, I thought about merch. Probably the best merch I could do at this point would be like a Genrenauts pin and maybe like a set of t-shirts with designs based on different versions of magic in Geekomancy. Like a t-shirt that says Geekomancer in a cool design, and then in the logo has like a die and like a not actually a lightsaber, or maybe like a fantasy sword and like some playing cards, or like kind of geek paraphernalia as part of a logo of a thing, and then the rest of the shirt kind of has that kind of stuff. That might work as much in that case, because people might not, like, they wouldn't necessarily have to have read that book to be able to see that logo or that design and go, Geekomancer, that's really cool. Yeah, like because of people's association with geekdom and fandom and things like that. Genrenauts, a pin. Like NASA astronauts have patches on their flight suits, and so a pin kind of works with that. Genrenaut defined more broadly as somebody who loves exploring and reading across a variety of genres. Like that makes sense. My understanding right now of how merch operates for authors in terms of the type of stuff that we can sell and the marketplaces that make that easier, the margins tend to be pretty small. So you want to figure out, like, can you do this at scale? Is it worth your time? Are you going to use, like, maybe you're using merch more as a marketing tool than as a revenue driving tool? If that's the case, then you probably don't want to think about it as a primary aspect of a diversified revenue stream system. Patreon, I have seen almost, like, if you have an established reader base already, then Patreon may be a way to make it easy for those readers to give you more money when they would like to give you more money. I have thought about, let's see, do I have a piece of paper that I can write this on? Yes, I do. Be prepared, there's going to be math. Only a little bit of math. Where's my pens? I'll be right back. Okay, be prepared for some math. This pen doesn't work. Okay, this time I got 3 pens. One of these pens should work. It does work, great. Okay. If you are an economist and you're watching, I'm sorry. This is going to be very crude. Okay, so here is, this is kind of like this is like an economics chart. So this y-axis here is the amount of, like, the cost of the things that you're offering, okay? The x-axis here is how many people are going to buy this thing. This is a little bit like a demand and supply chart, where it's like demand and supply is like this. People who took economics may remember this. There's a few different ways of expressing this. Actually, sorry. This chart is actually a better way of expressing this. Okay, so I'm an author. I sell a book for I sell an ebook of my book for $5. I sell a paperback of my book for $15. I don't sell anything of mine for $50. So, actually, let's say that 15 is here at this intersection, and then $5 is here. All right, so this is what I supply, and this is demand. So the demand is smallest at the most expensive stuff, and it's highest at the least expensive stuff. Again, very crude. So, $15. I sell my paperbacks for $15. So, I capture all of the sales of people who are happy to pay $15 for my book. Sorry. Because I have an offering at that price. I sell things at $5, so I can capture everybody who is happy to spend this much. If I only sell one book a year for $15 or for $5, I am probably going to get $15 or $5 from a given reader who loves my work. I might get 20 because I might get both 15 and 5 because they'll buy both versions. If, let's see, 15, 25, so if I offer extra fiction for $2 a month, the person who loves my work and has bought my book for $15 and my book for $5, so they have in both formats. We're ignoring audio for right now, it's fine. If I also give them the opportunity to give me $2 a month on Patreon because I am providing additional fiction, I am increasing the supply and I am diversifying the type of things of my work that I am offering for them to give me money for. If you are an established author to any degree, there is a decent chance that there are people who love your work and do not have enough ways to give you money to satisfy how much they love your work. Or their thirst for your work is greater than what you are able to provide based on your rate of writing. So I can only write 1, possibly 2 books a year in a good year. In a non-pandemic year, I might be able to write 2 novels. But if I write novels and then I write essays about publishing and I do streams and I talk about the business of publishing, maybe somebody would be happy to buy a book for $15 from me each year as I write them and give me $2 a month for Patreon, which then means that I'm getting more money overall. So I'm diversifying my revenue from the same readers because some of those readers are happy to spend more money on my stuff than I am offering them the chances to. This is something I think that has been displayed very powerfully in Brandon Sanderson's Kickstarter. Sanderson writes so much that he was already producing a bunch of different books. So someone could only read Brandon Sanderson books all year and they would have some number of books to read, more than 3 in most years. Those people, a lot of those readers revealed that not only are they happy to read 3 Sanderson books a year, they would pay more money to then also get more other stuff from Brandon Sanderson, even more novels or merch for the novels that they already like. If, as an author, your whole title selection, your whole market is you can buy my ebooks for this many dollars. You can buy my paperbacks for this many dollars. You can buy my audio for this many dollars. And they're the only things that I can offer you. You may get to the point where you have people who wish they could give you more money but don't know how to do so because they have a high degree of emotional investment in your work, whether they want to support you as a writer in general, they want to buy more things from you because they like how you do whatever it is. Patreon and that, like, closing that supply gap is a whole big topic. If you diversify if you diversify what you offer, then you're not only diversifying this chart here where you're adding the higher things. If you sell if you sell 5,000 copies of your paperback every year and you sell 12,000 copies of your ebook, it's not bad. Pretty good depending on a bunch of factors. If you have 5,000 people that will buy your paperback every year and 12,000 people that will buy your ebook every year, how many of those people would buy a $60 really pretty hardcover of that same book you produce every year? You'll never know unless you offer it. So this kind of different price points thing is a thing that publishing does, but does not do as much as they could. Hardcover comes out at $26, maybe $30-something if it's bigger. A year later, they offer the same book in paperback at $15 to $18 or $20. Simultaneously, they offer the ebook at $13 if it's a traditional publisher, maybe $10 if they're starting with paperback. So they do a couple of price points, but they don't tend to do bundling. They don't tend to do merch alongside it. They don't tend to do kind of super deluxe hardcover of books by people who are not already really popular. And as The Kids Are Asleep said, TradPub's slowness is its own separate issue in terms of throttling that revenue stream. Traditional publishing has set up a whole big system in collaboration with bookstores and retailers and wholesalers where they can use scale to magnify sales across time. But to do so, you need to have your cover and your manuscript done and ready to present 9 months ahead of the book's publication, so that you can then present that material to the buyers at the biggest bookstores, specifically Barnes & Noble and Amazon, and then a few months later, if not the same time, you present to independent bookstores and wholesalers and probably to libraries. They want that time because of a variety of factors. But that means that if I sell a book if I finished revising the book I'm writing tomorrow, my agent would start selling it within the next month or so, because she'd probably read it and then sign off on it and have to do some strategy work in terms of figuring out who to sell it from. Even if that book sold in 6 weeks, which is very fast, agreeing to terms on a book at let's say the 1st of May, that book would probably not come out until August 2023. Right now, publishing is more slow because of paper shortages and things and lots of COVID delays. But if I write a book and that book is ready to edit, or maybe even ready to just sell because it's really, really polished, I think it's very important to go through the editorial process. But if I sell a book and then it doesn't come out for 15 months, it's not making me more money for 15 months, except in certain circumstances, because before it goes on sale for retail, the only way it's going to make me more money is by selling sub-rights versus selling individual copies. If we then compare that to self-publishing, if I finished revising this book tomorrow, I could commission art for it. I could commission an editor to do editorial work with me on it. And I could commission someone to do the production once the editorial work was done. And probably be ready to start selling that book in 3 months. If I was actively self-publishing, I would have already done some of this work. I would have commissioned the art possibly before I'm done with revision so that I could release faster. Not doing print sales into this broad retail marketplace means that I can move much more rapidly. Not using the force multiplying powers of traditional publishing means that when I'm trying to sell physical copies, I am almost entirely cut out from the physical distribution system that traditional publishing relies on for the overwhelming majority of how they like to do business. Like Amazon sells a lot of physical books. Traditional publishing would be happier if the retail field, the wholesale world, and the library world sold more of the copies because it's where they have more influence versus Amazon, who again has monopsonic tendencies and behaviors in my IMHO. If Amazon wants to sue me for libel, I will have a bad time and they will look even worse. So that slowness is also a factor that you have to think about. When you're deciding how you want to do your business and you're thinking about revenue streams, liquidity of money, or like how quickly stuff is going to start making you money, is also something to think about. To pull it back to what is the advice I would give, without being able to individually talk with someone through their process and what they like doing, what they're experienced in doing, and their connections and so on, I would say for diversifying revenue streams, write books as fast as you can and you're happy with it until you feel like you have an audience. If you're writing as fast as you can and you have more energy and you want to spend it on diversifying your revenue streams, look to your strengths and your skills and think about how you can put yourself in a position to get paid for using those other aspects of your skill set, whether it is teaching, whether it is going ahead and trying to monetize with Patreon, whether it is offering other things on Patreon, whether it is selling short fiction. And with diversification, you probably want to think about 80-20, where your overall income, what are the things you can do that are going to make 80+% of the money that you're going to make in a given year? Where are you going to get the most bang for your buck? If you are thinking about monetizing, like diversifying revenue stream through merch, and you are a mid-list author who tends to sell between 5,000 and 20,000 copies of each book, is that an audience large enough to make merchandise sales a substantial part of your revenue? The answer may be no, and it may be hard for the answer to not be no. There are going to be certain circumstances that are exceptions for all of these things. The online teaching ecosystem is easier to break into than it used to be. Maybe you'll make more money as an editor because there's so many authors self-publishing that you can use the fact that you have a track record as an author who has worked through the traditional ecosystem, or as an author who has self-published and had books been well regarded, so clearly you can write and work with an editor to reach a certain editorial standard. You might make more money editing. So you can think about how much money per amount of time can you get from these different things, and what is the demand for those different things. The demand for editorial work, copy editing, layout / ebook production, or design or art, design or illustration, those are probably going to be relatively high compared to the market and interest for merch, the market and interest for monetizing via Patreon, for teaching. Kind of the money you get from it may be proportionately better than writing short fiction. Again, this depends in a bunch of different ways. This is me trying to do my best job giving a general overview of thinking about how to diversify your revenue as an author so that you can survive capitalism, where it's like, I don't want to do a day job. I want to use my author skills in a bunch of different ways to make my money. And so that's my read on all of those. I hope that helps to anybody watching now or later. For myself, I do my writing. I offer career coaching and the mentorship that I mentioned earlier. I have my Patreon where people support my work and or are subscribing to get the essays, the videos, the excerpts and things. Like a chunk of my Patreon supporters mostly just want to support me. A chunk are there because they're very interested in what I have to say with these essays, often because they are also writers. So my Patreon is not just one thing to everybody. It's like it serves some different purposes. So it's a little bit of a hybrid. And then I am doing Twitch, which is mostly not about making money. I mostly think about Twitch as a way to connect with people who like my stuff, to keep in touch with colleagues, and to have fun in a way that also gives me some social energy. Mandatory fun, as the kids are asleep says. Yeah, and like the Twitch is especially useful while we are still in a global pandemic and I'm not traveling nearly as much. Like I'm hoping to get to a few conventions this year, but that will be pandemic dependent. So we got to 3 o'clock, 2 solid hours of craft chat, of which about 45 to 60 minutes was talking about the industry, which honestly is totally fine by me. Like that absolutely works. So tonight at 7 p.m. at twitch.tv/ArvanEleron, ARVANELERON, you can find myself, the kids are asleep, and the rest of the Strange Friends crew playing Girl by Moonlight in our game Fractal Spire. It's very fun. I expect we will continue our trend of high chaos and big feelings, which became the signature of the Case of the Cindered Seal. So check that out. If you are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to find that at youtube.com/ArvanEleron, so the same name because that is the channel of Gregory A. Wilson, who is one of the 3 co-hosts of Speculate, along with Brandon O'Brien and myself. And you can support the stream here at Twitch with a subscription or bits or something like that. Or you can become a patron at patreon.com/MichaelRUnderwood. If you liked what I had to say about business and like problems with the industry and things, there are lots of essays written by me at that Patreon, because that's, for most of the Patreon's life, that has been the primary thing that I offer to patrons. More recently, I've been mixing up this craft chat and other things like that. So that is that thing. I would say you should go and follow The Kids Are Asleep to watch the video games that Valerie and her husband Eric play. You should go and follow ArvanEleron because Greg streams a variety of cool games and has lots of smart things to say about storytelling writ large. He tends to focus on games with a strong storytelling aspect. And that is where we do our games of Speculate. You can also find information about Speculate at speculatesf.com, and that has some links where you can go and find the video on demand of the various things that we do for Speculate. I am currently trying to figure out scheduling for another Speculate game, which I will be GMing if we can get it off the ground, but we are not in a position yet to make any announcements on scheduling for that just yet. I don't think I have anything else interesting to say in terms of like important newsy bits. I'm working on republishing some books. So when I have hard dates for those, I will let you know so that you can pre-order or buy those things if these are books that you would like to add to your collection. I'm excited to get these books back out of the world. So that is that. This has been Craft Chat number 3, supported by patreon.com/MichaelRUnderwood. It is Sunday afternoon. I will see you tonight at 7 over at twitch.tv/ArvanEleron for some actual play adventure. Until then, or if not that, I will see you on Wednesday for another video game stream. Bye.